My career sucks.
Sex just isn't the same.
What's my purpose?
Where did this fat come from?
My relationship is killing me.
I'll never be happy.
My debt is piling up. I'll never find love. Why can't I be like other gay guys? Hey guys, it's time to get a grip, stop whining, make a bold move, and do something amazing with your 40-plus gay life. Let's get to the show with your Tell It Like It Is host, Rick Clemons, who does his best to never act like a dick or a diva unless you act like one first.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 40 Plus Gay Man Gay Talk. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because it is one of my favorite things to talk about. No, it's not wine, it's not food, it's not cycling, not my kids. Well, I love my kids, but we'll talk about that in a different episode. But I love, the world of finding relationships and what does it mean for gay men or anybody in the queer community, because it seems like we really, truly struggle when it comes to this area of life. Not that the heteros don't, but I feel like we have something that really can kind of turn us on our heads and make us do silly, stupid human things and all that good stuff. Well, today I have with me Tom Bruett. He's a therapist, a trainer, he's a consultant. He's a brand new author, and that's why we're having him on. He's got a brand new book coming out in March 2025. So I know here we are right before the holidays. I don't know if there'll be a pre-order available, but at least write it down for hey, it might be a good Valentine's gift, like to hand your significant other, a boyfriend or a girlfriend that you're trying to, I guess we're only talking to gay men, but hey, a relationship guide for gay men from honeymoon to lasting commitment. And I know a bunch of you just went yeah, right. Okay, that's why you don't have a relationship. Love you guys, love you dearly. But Tom, I'm so glad to have you here. Welcome to the podcast, and thanks for putting this lovely piece of work out there in the world, buddy.
Thanks, Rick. I'm so excited to be here and to talk about this topic with you.
It's just like having a child, isn't it? Well, I don't know if you've ever had a child, but putting a book out is like childbirth. It's just oh my gosh, will it ever get done? I know before we came on, you're yeah, I just sent the last proof in, and I'm going to just say, not to break your heart, man, you're still going to find something. There's going to be something in there. I had mine all done. We proved it. And then one day I was doing the audiobook actually, and I'm reading a sentence. I'm like, how the fuck did we miss this? And I actually said that in the audiobook, and I'm like, well, we'll be editing that out. So why this book? I know you do a lot of work in the queer community. You've done a lot of stuff with your Queer Relationship Institute, but why was now the time for you to say, let's go do this?
Well, there aren't a lot of great books out there for gay men and for gay relationships specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just really tired of having to kind of recommend to clients, okay, read this book, but just pretend that it's, written for you. Don't, just ignore all that heteronormative stuff. And there's some kind of kernels of good stuff in there if you can just keep going through it. But I wanted to create a book and a resource for people who, maybe they can't afford couples therapy, or they're not ready for relationship therapy, but they really want to either improve their relationship with themselves or with their partner or partners.
Yeah, I've had that trouble when I recommend people who are exploring polyamory or open relationships. I'm like, well, I think The Ethical Slut is a great book, but you kind of got to put yourself in that you're not heteronormative, not a and but I'm glad you're doing this, because this is one of the things that I feel like for most gay men, especially, this is one area that no matter how committed you think you are or how much you want a relationship, they just struggle. And I'm putting myself in that space as well. I mean, this is a struggle because there's something about male energy, regardless of whether you're a femme male or a masc male or whatever. I'm not going to get into all the labels, but there's just something about finding the way to make the groove happen. And I'm sure you must see this in your practice a lot too. It's this is a little thorn in the side, so to speak.
Of course. I mean, when you're socialized male, there's a lot of different things that we absorb, whether we want to or not, right? Little beliefs about, should you have feelings? Should you display feelings? We all know the boys don't cry and all that kind of stuff that I think most of your listeners are probably trying to work through and bust those myths. But, when you've absorbed this stuff from a really young age, when you look at Disney movies and there are no two Prince movies, you really take that stuff in. And so I do think that the first part of the book really does focus on that. How do you look at your own stuff? And I think as gay men and queer men, like we have experienced a lot of minority stressors that have influenced us, whether we had an amazing family or great coming out experience or whatever,
Right.
like it's still impacted us.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It doesn't matter how good it's been. There's these, I always say there's always going to be the pebble in the shoe that surprises you when you least expect it, you know?
Uh-huh.
And because of that, oftentimes we as men, so guys, I'm using the men first, we as men don't know how to navigate emotions and feelings. And then you add to the fact that you're gay men and you've been told, man up, be a man, blah, 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 all these sort of things. It makes it 10 times harder. It's also interesting that you brought the heteronormative thing up. And I don't know why this just crossed my mind, but I think it's a good example of like things we get conditioned. So a friend of my daughter's found out that he and his girlfriend are pregnant. So I'm trying to be like setting this up the way I would say it. And she said, well, he got her pregnant. And I'm like, okay. And I kind of let it go for a minute. And then I'm like, wait, my daughter's a really good feminist. You know, she gets it and everything. I said, so I just, not to try to stir up stuff, but I have a question for you. Why did you say he got her pregnant? This is like two people are in the equation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really good example of something that we accept as a norm. And then we go, well, why is this? And it's like gay men can't commit. And I just did a video on this. And of course, I got a whole bunch of backlash. Like, I'm committed. I'm like, I'm just saying in general, guys, okay? But it's those things. And do you see those sort of things being really diminishing when you're trying to work with either an individual or a couple where those norms, those stereotypes get so much in our way?
Uh-huh. Well, if I kind of think about it twofold. As queer people, as gay men, we have the opportunity to create a relationship that actually works for us. You know, we can throw off a lot of the heteronormative kind of stuff that has been imposed on us. We don't have to get married and have a kid and follow the relationship escalator up as is prescribed to most of our, straight counterparts. However, I do think that it does become tricky, and one of the ways I'm going to say something a little bit provocative here, but sometimes when people say, oh, open relationships don't work, or we can only do monogamy, or I want monogamy, or commitment looks like this, I actually think that's some version of internalized homophobia, because we're not able to actually look at, okay, what kind of structure will work for you and your partner or partners without any judgment on it, right? Like, what's going to work for you? What do you want? What will be satisfying? What will feel fulfilling and committed for you? But the reason I say I think it's part of that is internalized homophobia is that internalized homophobia, hate for queer people turned inward looks like saying big, broad statements like the whole queer community is this, or any kind of thing like that. And I think there's a lot of charge there around commitment and what commitment looks like in our community.
I love that you say what will work for you. This is one of my favorite things as a coach to ask a client, well, what would work for you? Which is always usually followed by, well, I'd like this, but then so and so. I'm like, I didn't care. I didn't ask you what everybody else would think. I want you to get really in your own power and say, what would work for you? Then we'll deal with how do you then navigate the beliefs and the values and everything that you're still carrying for everybody else, which is not a big fuck you to everybody else. I'm trying to get them really moved into that space. Like, get comfortable with like owning what you want and then figure out how you choose to navigate all that other stuff. But so many people get in their stuff and then they wonder why they are so stuck. So what's some of the most common things? I mean, I'm sure they're similar to what I come across as a coach, but I think in therapy, you get to see the deeper stuff. Like, what's some of the stuff that most gay men are getting hung up the most in your practice about relationships and commitment and all this sort of stuff?
Well, I think it starts with the concept that you're talking about right there. I call it differentiation in relationship. And so being able to know what you want, need, feel, and desire, and to tolerate the tension when your partner or partners want something different. And so that can look like, I want to open the relationship, my partner doesn't. I want kids, my partner doesn't. I want to move out of the country, especially right now. There's a lot of people saying that, right? And then we add on to that the trauma that we see in therapy. And so if you've experienced, some form of addiction or sexual abuse or, any kind of abuse at all, like that adds just another layer to the onion. And it can make it even that much more tricky to go inward and say, what do I want?
Mm-hmm. I think the trauma piece is something that so many of us, especially gay men, we know it's happened. I mean, whether it's trauma from being bullied or like church trauma from religious stuff or whatever it is, but we have never been modeled or socially, walked into that social construct of it's okay to realize this has existed. Now that we realize it's existed, it's happened, I remember once I was listening to an Oprah Super Soul Sunday, and she goes, just the acknowledgement, like, yes, this has happened. It happened is huge. Because once you can do that, then you can walk forward if you choose to. I mean, there's a whole choose and trusting yourself to walk forward. But I feel like so many gay men are almost like, oh, I don't want to talk about that I've had trauma. I don't want to talk about that I see a therapist, although I hear a lot. Maybe it's because I live close to LA, and there I go being stereotypical, like everybody's got a therapist or 2 or 3, right? But I feel like this is such a key element to moving forward. And I'm curious how you feel, because I feel like so many people avoid it or feel shame around it.
Well, I think if we combine some of the things we've been talking about, right? So if you come from a culture or a family that doesn't value mental health, I mean, for me, I grew up in a family where my dad died when I was 16. We didn't go to therapy, right? There was that was not a part of the culture or the experience. Right. So, we have that piece right there. If your family and your culture is saying therapy is not really the next best step for you, that's one piece of it. And then, yeah, I think as gay men, there's some shame around talking about when you've lived through something. If you lived through, for example, a sexual assault, you may not want to tell your first partner about that, because then is there shame there that, oh gosh, what if I'm damaged? What if there's something wrong with me because I had that kind of experience? And so, shame is such a sticky emotion. It just, once you start feeling shame about something, it can be difficult to kind of find your way back through the rabbit hole of what's actually going on in this particular moment for you.
I love that you say it's a sticky emotion, because it really is. It is so, I was feeling some of that this morning when I woke up, because I happen to be a guy that suffers from depression from time to time. And we've gotten, I've gotten to the point where I don't even take any meds for it anymore. But this morning I was just like, oh, I don't know why. We don't know why. It just kicks in and everything happens, right? And I was actually feeling shame about thinking, you know what, maybe, okay, let's just be honest. It could be because of the election and everything. I'm just like, okay, I'm feeling this a lot right now. But I had this shameful feeling about going, should I call my doctor? Should I maybe get on some meds for a little bit? And there was this weird thing like, oh, this is going to make me less of a man, or all this sort of stuff. And I know it's not going to make me less of a man. It's going to help me, do better what I need to do for me. And then after I had that little conversation with myself in my head, I was like, you know what? I actually feel better that I've just had that conversation. Let's keep moving forward. And I know now, when I hit the depression stuff, it never did take me down. I mean, it never was flat out, like couldn't function, none of that. But I could definitely be in rabbit holes. And I think for many gay men, especially when it comes to dating and relationships, as much as we like holes, pun intended there, boys, we sure like to dig some deep rabbit holes about relationships and dating. And it's just almost mind-blowing. So when you see somebody like stepping in, and like what's some of the stuff in the book that you feel like really helps the average, quote, gay men start to step into, what does it look like? What's some of the advice, without giving away the whole book, because I want them to buy your book, but what's a couple of things you would say for guys who are really struggling in those rabbit holes?
Yeah, so the book is structured based on these 7 stages of gay relationship development or queer relationship development. It's based on the work of my mentors, Dr. Alan Bader and Peter Pearson, who developed the developmental model of couples therapy. I've been kind of collaborating and working with them to adapt it to queer relationships, because we know queer relationships are different. And so the way that the book works is you go through the 7 different stages of the way that a relationship develops. The 2 stages that I added, the second queer adolescence and then the defining agreement stage, I think are specific to queer relationships, though I think every relationship should be, really clear about their agreements and what they're agreeing to. But the way that, when we think about typical relationship development, we often don't have role models or mentors, right?
Mhm.
So some of us have the opportunity to see, windows and mirrors of queer relationships or gay relationships that we want to have, in our lives. But one question that I ask oftentimes early on in working with a couple or a relationship is, who are your relationship role models? And
Mhm.
so often that question, people are like, I've never thought about it, or
Mhm.
I like a little bit of this relationship or a little bit of that relationship. And then you're on the path to starting to define the relationship that's going to work for you and your partners.
Yep.
And so, the way that kind of looking at the development of a relationship over 7 stages, and of course, not every relationship goes in exactly that order, and it's not meant to be like, follow these 7 steps and you'll find happiness.
Right.
But it just
Exactly.
kind of normalizes the experience for a lot of
Mhm.
people.
Mhm. I love that I'm assuming what I'm about to say here is somewhat aligned. I love the second queer adolescence because I work with so many guys who are coming out of the closet late in life. And I always say,
Mhm.
guess what? You're about to step into your adolescence because you never got to, quote, experience the real adolescence that you wanted. And then they're always so shocked, like, well, why is it I just want a guy, but then I really want a commitment? I'm like, because this is what being a teenage older man feels like now. You are a
Yeah.
teenage queer boy in your 40s, 50s, whatever it may be, because we didn't get to experience this. And I
Yep.
think this happens in heterosexual relationships a lot. Like when a divorce happens, suddenly, a lot of times it's one partner or the other goes into this whole adolescence thing. We call it, the mid-age life crisis, all this stuff.
Mhm.
But I don't think any of us give ourselves the permission, number one, and the grace, number two, to realize it's okay to be an adolescence because this is where we're going to grow up. We're going to
Yes.
finally figure stuff out. But when we deny this as gay men, specifically, I'm talking just for gay men, we continue to push the shame, the guilt, the you're not good enough agenda. And we don't even consciously realize that's exactly what we're doing.
It's so well said the way you just described that. And I think that's why it's incredible that there's resources like your podcast available, right? Because there weren't resources like this when I was going through my first
Mm-hmm.
adolescence or second for
Right.
adolescence. But I think the second gay adolescence for a lot of gay men is like a second coming out. You get
Mm-hmm.
to you come out about your sexuality and who you're attracted to, but then you get to actually self-define and say, hey, yeah, I'm a gay man, but I also really like sports or Broadway
Yep.
shows or whatever. What are the things that make you a unique gay person that have somewhat to do with your sexuality, but also you can feel free to just be your full self for the first time?
It's interesting, Tom, because I was, working with a client. Oh, I've worked with several clients over this, so let's just go there. Not anybody recently, but it's always so interesting when the concept of the coming out is something that they finally grasp. Like this is going to happen over and over. And I'm not like necessarily saying coming out to somebody. There's so many things that we come out about. Like I'm a guy who's in his 60s. I've talked about this a little bit, but I think this is a good place to interject it once again. Coming out about what you enjoy sexually as you're aging and as things happen is a whole nother shame thing that happens. I used to fuck like rabbits. Okay, cool. Oh yeah, I'm a dom top or whatever. Yeah. And then suddenly as things shift, it's like, oh, maybe, but I don't want anybody to know. And it's like almost this incessant shame that clouds us in everything we do. And I hope that part of this conversation and the stuff that you have in the book is giving people permission to realize this is you just being you. And one of the things I talked recently about with my husband was, the agreements. And we don't say, oh, let's go over our agreements, but like, hey, here's something I want to share with you that I want to make sure works for you so that we're in the same space. It's that simple, like just share what's on your mind. And it's amazing how much you can open doorways and go, oh, maybe I can be in a committed relationship because we have these candid conversations.
Yeah.
And I feel like many gay couples trip over those. And that's why they're suddenly like, I'm out, I'm gone, I'm done. Do you see that
Yeah,
as
I
well?
think 100%. And so many relationship conflicts happen from unspoken agreements. So,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you think monogamy looks this way, but I think monogamy looks that way. Flirting with our friend is okay or it's not okay. And then, we add thinking again about men being socialized as men, right? We're socialized to
Mhm.
problem solve. We are not socialized to listen and understand. And with, I would say 90% of the gay male couples I work with, if you would just be quiet and actually listen to your partner and try to understand what's the most important thing in what they're saying, a lot of your conflicts would go away, right? But so many people, they try to solve the problem. And if you're solving the problem before you fully understand it, it's like playing that whack-a-mole game, right? Where you're like hitting one problem and it pops up
Yep.
somewhere else.
But I loved that. Was almost like I felt like we were having our little Oprah moment here when you said problem solve versus understand. As soon as somebody says, this is what I want, then the first thing that usually happens is, well, blah, blah, blah. No, take it in, absorb it, feel it. Understand is such a beautiful thing. And it's not easy. I'm a very strong energy, was raised in a narcissistic household. So I have to battle the narcissism a lot because that was my model, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was a good model for me to know this is how I don't want to be. But there are times that I can see it coming up. I'm like, nope, you got to stop. And when I understand that half the time, as soon as something gets said, whether it was my husband, a coworker, whomever, my kids, whatever, if I just go, okay, interesting, and let myself have that moment instead of going, no, this is how this needs to get done.
Yes.
I am much more relaxed, much more empathetic. I don't feel as stressed.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a load that those of us who like are problem solving. Like, I don't think either you or I, either one, could do what we do for a living if we were constantly in let's solve the problem mode. We would be absolutely exhausted at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Just couldn't. And it's always interesting to me, and maybe you have this same experience. When you're working with a client, they're like, well, tell me what to do. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I can't. My gay magic wand doesn't work that way. Like,
I can tell you
so
what to do, but you're probably not going to listen to me.
You're not going to like it or listen because it's not embedded in the heart and soul of who you are.
Yes.
And I think so in dating, this happens all the time. Gay men like, just tell me what to do. Tell me how to do this. There's no magic, even your book coming out. I'm sure there's lots of good stuff, but that doesn't mean 100% of it's going to work for everybody. It's like, find what works. I remember when Alan Downs, and this was just as I was coming out and starting to work in the community, and I started recommending the Velvet Rage to so many guys, right? Well, the twist is, for a guy who's coming out late in life, a lot of them are like, I can't relate to this. This isn't me. I'm like, I'm not asking you to relate 100%. There's good stuff in there. Take what you can and make it work for your life. But so many of us, I feel like, struggle with that.
Yeah. And I say this over and over again. The queer community, the gay community is not a monolith, right? Like, there's as many gay men out there as there are gay men out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we can help in some broad ways, but you still got to find what's going to work for you.
What's one of the things that you found has worked best for you personally, navigating through relationships and all of this stuff? I'm sure some of it's what you've already said, but what's like something that you just know, like, I know this will always help me if I do this?
Yeah, so it's in the book. I do share some personal things about my own development and my relationship development with my partner. We've been together about 7.5 years, and I share some of the things that have been challenging for me. As I was gay married and gay divorced early in my life, and so it took a while to get to the point where I am. But the most important thing that I have learned is to be honest. Like, be 100% authentically honest, even if I'm going to make him uncomfortable, even if he may not like what I want to hear, even if it feels scary or risky. If I'm not honest, we can't even begin to have a real conversation. And it takes so much guts and courage, I think, to be fully honest, not in a way where you're an asshole or something, but, in a way where you can just fully show up and say, this is what's important to me.
You're an anomaly. You've already been gay married and gay divorced. No, you're not. No, I remember when all this was happening, in our community, it's like, oh, so you want to be like the heteros. And I remember having so many conversations like, I just want to be married and I know I'll be in it forever. I'm like, bitch, you will probably be one of the first ones. I didn't want to like douse their fire, but I'm like, Take it from a guy who's gone through a divorce. Gay or straight, it's either going to work or it isn't. It's just that simple, you know? But I do believe that honesty piece that you just brought forward, Tom, it's so critical. And most people are like, well, but it's so scary to be honest. Yes. Yes, it is. But what's on the other side of the honesty is what's not scary. Relief and peace of mind. And yes, there may still be stuff, but I know, and you and I had a similar response to the question. I know that integrity piece, like just be in integrity. You know, if you want to go screw somebody else, just say, I really would like to go have another piece of ass for a night. Just now doesn't know where that's going to lead, but you know, it's so much better than, okay, well, I don't want him to find out, but this is what I'm going to go do. And then now I got to carry all this. And maybe that's because that was my life. That was my life when I was married to my wife. It was like I was doing all this. But I think that honesty piece, even though it's scary, and it's how you deliver it. I think there's a key piece in there. Like, I'm Tom, I'm coming to you because I care enough about our relationship that I want to say something just so you can hear it from me. And let's see where we can go once I share what I'm about to share. To me, it's all in the delivery.
Yes.
So when somebody wants to be honest, I'm going to come back to your own, what's some of the ground rules you feel like you lay down to be able to share honestly? Like, how do you approach it with yourself?
Well, I think for me, I have to make a commitment that I'm going to do the work myself to figure out what my wants, needs, feelings, desires, longings, you know, what is true to me. Sometimes that looks like therapy. Sometimes it looks like coaching. I had some really powerful psychedelic therapy that helped me along the way. Sometimes it's spirituality, right? And I talk about lots of different options in the book. It's not just therapy, but what are the things that you're going to do, the self-work you're going to do to really be able to get clear with yourself what is important to you at the end of the day. Because I can show up to a conversation with my partner about anything, and if I'm just spewing unfiltered trauma and feelings at him, it's going to be difficult for him to know what I'm talking about and for me to know what I'm talking about. So I have to do that, make that commitment to myself to show up in a way that is, I think, fair to him and fair to me.
One of the things you just said that I think I don't want anybody to miss, and I think it's really important, is whether you find it through therapy or coaching or psychedelics, which each one of them brings its own unique twist. And sometimes I don't think that gets explained to that. You know, I feel like, and here's my simple version, and then I'd love for you to weigh in it. The way I explain it to clients is, as a coach, I'm not going to dig really deep into the trauma or what's happened in the past. I will acknowledge it with you and go, how did you spring forward from that? Because what I'm looking for then is, how do I help you spring forward? Because you've already possibly learned it if you've done some therapy. However, if that's really deep, I'm probably not your guy. I can keep you catapulted and moving forward and getting things done and seeing things and questioning things. But if it's really deep stuff, to me, that's where a therapist is uber critical. And I've turned people away like, I want you to go do the therapy work first and then come back. Or if you want to be doing therapy while we're doing this together, there's a lot of times I've worked side by side with a therapist as much as I can. I'm not at the level like, you know, we have agreements like, hey, here's what I can share. But then you took it to the whole other place of like the psychedelics. And some people be like, yeah, but that's not, then don't do it. That's not your pathway forward. I'm a deep spiritual person. So sometimes, like, since the election, I've been getting real spiritual. Like, okay, let's lean back into some Buddhist practices and like, let's get back in there again. And I think each piece serves its own unique way of helping you get through it. So what's your take on what I
think
shared?
you said it really, really beautifully. And kind of just to add to that, sometimes we try something and it doesn't work, right? Say you try therapy or coaching and then you're like, oh, I'm still feeling depressed, or I'm still not in the relationship I want to be in. Guess what? You got to try something else. You got to keep going and going and going until you find a level of inner peace. And you know, we don't know enough yet about the brain. We don't know yet enough about all this other stuff to say, you need to do X. If you're having depression, therapy is the best bet. Or if you're having depression, you know, do X, Y, or Z things. Yes, we have some ideas of, you know, tools that can be helpful, but keep expanding your toolbox. Keep finding ways to heal, because it's a lifetime journey.
Well, and it is all a lifetime journey of healing. I think so many people, and this has nothing to do with gay men per se, but I think I am going to bring it back to gay men. We want the one and done. Like, okay, I did this, now good, I'm ready to roll. And it's, again, I'm going to come back to when I work with a client and say, you will never, ever quit coming out of the closet. It's never going to happen.
Nope.
Because whether it's a conversation with someone or a feeling of, oh, I feel like I've got this shame, but I'll hide that. I'm like, the minute you hide something, you are putting something in a closet that's going to need to come out of it. And it's always really shocking when I speak on stages. And one of my lines is, the interesting thing about everyone in this room, and this we're talking like a mixed crowd, right? It's not LGBTQ, even the LGBTQ, I'll say it. Everyone in this room, believe it or not, has a coming out journey. And every one of you has a closet that you're coming out about something, and probably not just one. No, we're not going to go buy one California closet. You're going to have a whole bunch of California closets you're going to come out of. And people are always like, what's he getting at here? I said, because whatever you're hiding and you don't want anybody to see is the closet you want to come out of. And I feel like we as queer men, so I'm going to go there, we need to leverage that a whole lot more, that we have had the perseverance, the resilience, the pain, the suffering to come out. So now let that be your fuel when you're like, hey, I don't know if I can go for that job promotion. Really? Then guess what? There's your closet. Why not? What is it you want to experience? What will be on the other side of it? And I think those are the beautiful pieces that we can bring to this work. So I'm curious, what do you most want men who read your book? Like, if you could say, I would love them to walk away with this thing. I know there's seven things and all this, but if you could say, my heart would be full if what?
I would love somebody to read the book and say, I see myself in that book. I can see a relationship that I want for myself in that book. And there are actually some practical things that I can start doing today, either with myself or with my partner or partners, that can just slightly improve my relationship. Because I really believe that strong relationships build strong communities. And without having, a lot of experts in the field of gay relationships right now, we're all sort of explorers trying to figure this out together. And so, there's not enough queer therapists and gay therapists. There's not enough, I think, probably even gay and queer coaches out there to help all the people that want to be helped.
Yep. Yeah, I belong to, and I know not everybody is part of it, but I belong to the Gay Coaches Alliance. And I remember when I joined, this was, I don't know, probably clear back in 2014, maybe. There's like 10 of us. Wow. And now there's like 80 of us. But I know that's not even, we're just barely scraping the top of the barrel, because I know there's lots of them. And I think the beauty is that by being able to do this and show people that there are people that sound like me, look like me, oh my gosh, see how they've had that experience, we can help each other move forward. You don't have to want to have kids. You don't have to want to have monogamy. You don't have to, be in an open relationship. But the more these things get talked about and they get shared, and you do the self-work, I think that's the thing. Every day I feel like I know every day I'm doing some form of self-work. But I allow myself to go there, because I realize if I don't, I'm shaming myself back into some sort of a closet that's just going to take me more work to dig out of, instead of just being brutally open and honest about things.
And we just want to be free,
I guess
right?
Yes, we do want to be free. And I think that's the thing, is as hard as we have worked for to be free as gay men, keep doing that same work when you think about dating, relationships, being in a marriage, not being, there are some people like, I don't need to be married. I don't need to be married to feel that way. I'm like, cool, good for you. Some of us want it, but that doesn't mean whatever we want. It's kind of like, let's go to the hot button trigger. If you don't want a damn abortion, then don't get an abortion. Let's just be real, folks. Okay. Yeah. But I think these are the beautiful things that you're bringing forth in the book. I love that you're giving this out there into the world as a new, breath of fresh air. We need more queer publications before they tell us we can't put anything in libraries and stuff anymore. But I
hope it's a banned book.
I know I'm waiting for my first one to be banned. I'm like, I would love to see it on the ban list. So, it is what it is, but, well, very good. So Tom Bruett, his book is The Go-To Relationship Guide for Gay Men from Honeymoon to Lasting Commitment. It's out March 2025. Fingers crossed, right? I know we're doing this in December, but I've been through the publication thing. You never know when. I'm not wishing that on you, Tom. Trust me. I just want you to be able to get it out there. But it'll be out then, and I'm sure it'll be available on every outlet that you can find it on. And again, thank you so much for sharing of yourself, being with me, sharing with our guys. And if anybody wants to get in touch with Tom, we'll have his website and links to everything so you can do that. But thanks again for being here, Tom. Sure appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Rick.
That's a wrap for 40 Plus. Gay men, gay talk, where size doesn't matter. We drop our bullshit, get over our screwed up fears, make bold moves, and live life without apologies. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40 Plus, Gay Men, Gay Talk, where the conversations continue.